Okay, be totally honest with me for a second. Are you actually listening to this explainer right now? Or are you just hearing the audio in the background while you scroll through your phone or flip through another tab? It's okay, we all do it. But today, we are going to completely dismantle the way you think about communication. We're looking at the evolution of listening and transforming it from a basic, passive biological reflex into a highly active toolkit and ultimately into a multi-million-dollar enterprise strategy.
All right, here's our roadmap for the explainer. We're going to cover how hearing is not listening, building your active listening toolkit, mastering deep empathetic listening, zooming out to cultural and contextual listening, and finally, listening 2.0 in the business world. Let's jump right in.
Section 1. Hearing is not listening. So the crucial thing to understand right off the bat is that hearing is really just an automatic reflex. I mean, it takes literally zero effort. It's just your brain's biological response to environmental noise, like, a lawnmower outside, the hum of your fridge, or street construction. We actually train ourselves to block that stuff out. But listening is purposeful. It's focused, concentrated attention. You actually have to have the motivation and put in the active effort to extract meaning from the person speaking. Basically, if you aren't putting in the effort, you're not listening.
We all obsess over public speaking and presenting, right? But the data shows the real professional stakes are actually in listening. General adults spend about 45% of their day just listening. For workers, that bumps up to 55%. And managers, they spend nearly 2/3 of their entire day doing this one single activity. Your success in leadership is, quite literally, mathematically tied to your ability to listen.
And honestly, we can't take this skill for granted. If you think back through human history, way before the written word or recorded video, the sheer survival of tribal histories, myths, and relationships depended entirely on active, real-time listening. And today, those exact same benefits still hold up. Being an active listener means you're completing tasks efficiently without messing up. You're building these incredibly satisfying relationships because you're actually validating people. And surprisingly, it even makes you a better public speaker because you're constantly analyzing how other people put their arguments together.
Section 2, the Active Listening Toolkit.
Now here's a fun fact. Your brain processes words way faster than anyone can actually speak, which means your mind is naturally going to wander. So you've got to deliberately occupy those extra mental channels, and you can do this by priming your brain with structured internal dialogue. First up is covert coaching. This is literally giving yourself mental advice, like, hey, focus on what your boss is saying right now, stop thinking about dinner. Next is self-reinforcement, basically giving yourself a quick mental high five for paying attention. And finally, covert questioning. This is where you ask yourself things like, okay, what's the core idea here? It actively brackets out all that distracting psychological noise so you stay laser-focused.
But active listening isn't just playing a mental game inside your own head. You have to outwardly show it. If you're listening, but you're checking your watch, the speaker's just going to assume you don't care at all. You show you're engaged with steady eye contact, an upright posture where you're leaning in just a bit, and by naturally mirroring their facial expressions. You've also got to throw in verbal back channel cues, like a simple mm-hmm or right, and actively summarize and reflect back what they're saying without interrupting. It's a full body exercise.
Section 3. Mastering deep empathetic listening.
Okay, this right here is the absolute golden question. Are you listening to respond, or are you listening to understand? So many of us, and yeah, I'm guilty of this too sometimes, make the huge mistake of formulating our reply, our witty comeback, or our defense before the other person has even finished their sentence. And when you do that, you completely miss the true nonverbal cues and the real emotional weight of what they're saying. You aren't listening, you're just waiting for your turn to talk.
And the emotional stakes here are actually really profound. Behavioral health therapist Melissa J. Burnell points out that people who've experienced trauma tend to be incredibly hypervigilant. They're constantly on the lookout for something to go wrong. So, when we're communicating, we have to recognize that trauma and hypervigilance can act like these invisible walls. The person you're talking to might be bracing for a threat or a conflict. Deep listening means we have to offer incredible patience and deliberately create a safe, judgment-free space to truly validate their lived experience.
By setting aside our own egos and our own perspectives, we build deep, lasting trust. And the payoffs are massive. We're talking heightened emotional intelligence, vastly better conflict resolution, and just profound personal growth. But here is the major takeaway for this whole section. You don't measure your success in deep listening by how smart your response is. You measure it by whether the speaker genuinely feels your compassion and empathy. If they look at you and say, "Wow, I feel like you really get me," well, you've succeeded.
Section 4. Cultural and contextual listening.
Now, the way we listen completely shifts depending on where we are in the world. Take a low-context, monochronic culture, like the US or Northern Europe, for example. These cultures demand immediate, explicit verbal details, and they view time as a super scarce commodity. It's all about getting straight to the point, right? But then look at a high-context, polychronic culture, like you'd find in many parts of East Asia or Latin America. Here, communication relies heavily on silence, nonverbal signals, and contextual clues, and there's a lot more flexibility with time. If a low-context listener doesn't realize this and adapt, they're just going to end up frustrated, totally missing the subtle, unspoken messages the other person is sending.
And we've also got to talk about gender. It is so easy to fall into these tired stereotypes about how men and women listen differently. But research actually dispels a lot of the biological myths around this. The data shows that behaviors, like men supposedly withholding emotion or interrupting more, are really driven by societal expectations and socialized norms, not biological hardwiring. For instance, competitive interrupting is usually a socialized tactic to establish dominance in specific settings, not some innate, unchangeable trait. Once we recognize those biases, it makes us much more critical, self-aware listeners.
And finally, Section 5, Listening 2.0 in Business.
So how do huge organizations listen? Well, they use something called Voice of the Customer, or VOC. A VOC program is basically designed to capture omni-channel feedback and turn it into actual business impact. But there is a massive problem happening right now. Today's consumers, they're increasingly just staying silent. When they get frustrated, they don't bother to call and complain, they literally just switch brands. And because of that, traditional survey response rates are absolutely plummeting. Relying strictly on surveys right now is kind of like only listening to the absolute loudest person in the room and ignoring everyone else.
So to survive this, the top companies are evolving to what's being called Listening 2.0. They're moving way beyond just blasting out email surveys that nobody answers. Instead, they're actively hunting for silent signals. They're analyzing tons of unstructured data across digital channels and contact centers. Basically, they're listening to how customers are actually behaving rather than just waiting for them to raise their hands and say something explicitly.
And the sheer scale of this is staggering. Take the financial giant Nationwide, for example. We've seen that successfully capturing and analyzing unstructured data, those silent signals, across over 12 million customers is entirely possible today. Now, yeah, it requires massive change management, but it is the ultimate proof that modern, empathetic, multi-channel listening drives massive organizational growth and customer retention. At this level, listening isn't just some soft skill, it is hard business currency.
All right, we've covered a lot of ground in this explainer. We scaled listening all the way from a basic biological reflex to analyzing millions of silent enterprise data points. But the common thread through all of it? Intention. Whether you are a CX leader analyzing massive data sets or you're just grabbing coffee with a friend today, the challenge is exactly the same. Suspend your assumptions, put in the effort, and try to genuinely understand. So I'll leave you with this. How are you going to apply deep listening in your very next conversation?